Cage matches. You know, they're big matches, but cage matches, you know, just the suspense of climbing up, trying to get out, and trying to go out the door. There's not a lot to it. And the only thing that really makes a cage match, in my opinion, is blood. You got to have lots of blood. You know, both wrestlers bleeding, pounding each other, scraping their faces in the mesh and the cage and all that, and climbing up, and the dramatic blood dripping off the guy's face on the mat and everything. It's a very powerful match once you deliver the blood into the match. And with Owen, I remember it was like, well, as we were going into it, they said, we're going to put you guys in a cage match. And I remember thinking with Owen, I said, when we got together and we talked about it, I said, I don't like the vision of two brothers that really do. Owen and I were really close, and in real life. And I said, I just don't like the vision of pictures and the memory being forever, be highlighted forever of me and Owen both covered in blood wrestling each other. And I said, we're not going to get blood in this match. And no one asked us to either, but I would have done it. We would have had blood in that match. I would have done it on my own. If it had been anybody else but Owen, but I said, I kind of refused. I said, to myself, I said, I'm never going to go down that road, not with my own brother. And so we were really limited, I think, in a sense, in that match. It was really, it's like having a chocolate sundae without the chocolate syrup on it. You know, you got to have blood in a cage match, otherwise it's kind of boring, if you ask me. It's just the same thing over and over and over. And but I remember we both were like determined, and Owen, I think, was in full agreement with me. He didn't want our two younger boys that were growing up, Oj and Blade was my son. We didn't want them thinking or being, I knew Owen's kid would have been really scared watching something like that it would have really haunted him and bothered him. Two brothers covered in blood, beating on each other and all that stuff. So we planned out the match and tried to do everything we could do to have the best cage match ever with no blood. And that's what it really was. I think it stands as a classic, maybe as good as any other cage match that has blood in it, but I was just glad that we didn't. And I love the match that I had with Owen. I think when I think of the cage match and I remember suplexing Owen off the top of the cage, that's such a long ways down. I mean, I remember when we did it, it was like, holy shit. I remember I felt like I was falling backwards for about 20 minutes. And but anyway, it was a long fall. I remember it was a hard fall too, but I think it was a fine match.
What do you remember about that finish? Because Owen being caught in the cage, that hadn't really been done before. It was like a fresh way to do it. How did that come about?
Actually, that was Owen's idea. I didn't know how to necessarily. I knew that it would come down to me and Owen at the end, where we would jump, or I would jump and beat him by a couple of inches, as whoever lands first, feet first on the floor. But Owen, it was Owen's idea to tangle his leg up in the cage and get hooked, and that was how that went.
Then we get to 1997, and we have the Hart Foundation are together. It's Owen, Davey, you, Pillman, and Anvil, and you. And you guys were heels in America, but baby faces everywhere else. That almost sounded like a Mexican wave of applause there. But so it comes to SummerSlam, it's you and Undertaker for the title. And I mean, that match, who remembers that match? That Undertaker Bret Hart match was one of the best main events of SummerSlam. How does that rank for you in terms of your favorite matches of your career?
It's right up there in the top five maybe. I have my favorite matches. Like my favorite, it's hard to say whether, I love the match at Wembley with the Bulldog, because it was such a great match, and Davey was so like I had to carry Davey for 35 minutes and not let on that I was carrying Davey for 35 minutes. And it was great for Davey kind of doing what he did do, and we pulled it off. I remember we came back, it was like a masterpiece to me. I thought it was, there's a couple of times when you're watching that match, you can see me calling spots to Davey, which I hate, because I was one of those wrestlers that, you never catch me calling high spots or talking to another wrestler in the ring. You watch my matches back over and over. I might communicate with another wrestler all the way through the match, but you never see me doing it. But in the Wembley match, you do a couple of times catch me talking to Davey. And so but I loved that match. I loved the Iron Man match with Shawn. It was like the hardest 1 hour I ever wrestled in my life. And the match was like, when I finished that match, that Iron Man match, it took me about 3 months to walk right. And, I really pull out all the stops for that match. So that was one of my all-time favorites. And then, of course, I think the match with Austin at WrestleMania 13 was the best match of all time. But Undertaker, he was, we were really good friends, and he was one of those kind of wrestlers that was very much in control of what he did. And like he had a certain style and certain things he did in the match, like sitting up and doing the Frankenstein thing where he's, all that. You had to kind of cater to his style, And what I loved about the match with Undertaker was that we were both two guys that had this really great relationship and respect for each other. And Undertaker, I remember when I split my matches up and think about what the contributions were to the match, I think the Iron Man match was probably about 70-30 for me and Shawn, like 70% my match, and there was only a few things that Shawn contributed to that match, really, maybe even less than 30%, maybe 20%. And that's not a knock on Shawn. Shawn, generally the champion is in charge and controls the tempo. I tell Shawn what we're doing, basically, in that scenario. And so that was my match, the Iron Man match. And the match with Steve. Steve brought the tree stump puller, or that move where he put his leg behind the back of my neck and tried to break my neck or whatever. That was the only submission hold I think he contributed to the match. The rest of the match was the same thing. I think I put that whole match together with Steve in the ring. But I would say it was probably maybe 80-20, to be honest. And but the SummerSlam with Undertaker is like 50-50. He's got very much control of what he was doing and what I had to do, what he needed me to do for him, and then me sort of having to approach Mark or Undertaker about like what can I do to you kind of stuff, and then we would come up with stuff that I could do that was believable and acceptable to that Frankenstein kind of gimmick that he had. But I remember when I worked with Mark, when I first worked with him before that, I remember when we finally were having matches together, I remember he came up and he was all excited, almost like a little kid. He was, I finally get to show everybody that I can really wrestle. And that's the truth, is that he was a great wrestler, Undertaker. I thought and he really wanted to have a real match, not where he was like Frankenstein and sitting up and, looking at Paul Bearer and all that kind of stuff. He wanted to go in there and show everybody that he was a real worker. And I wanted to try to do the same thing for him. And, that's what I love about that SummerSlam match, is that I think it was just a masterpiece of two guys trying really hard to make each other. And Undertaker did everything he could for me. And I know that I was just talking about it earlier today, about nobody ever kicked out of the sharpshooter, but Undertaker did. He was the only guy I would give that honor to. And, when he kicked out, I remember I took a bump all the way through underneath the bottom rope and out about halfway up the aisle to the dressing room. Pretty hard bump to manufacture that. But we were really, We just had great chemistry. We always got along. I think between Undertaker and Stone Cold are two guys that just we just had this amazing chemistry every time we stepped in the ring. And I loved the SummerSlam match with Undertaker.